up early in the morning, possibly increasingly smoky day, coming to help us plan our future. I so appreciate you coming out. It really means a lot to have all your voices. I see a cross-section of town here like none other, really. It's really from all walks of life. Wonderful. This is a dream that the library has had for actually many years. It predates me. I'm just the current caretaker. I don't know, Renee can probably testify to the fact that several directors ago, probably, there have been different thoughts across the years of ways to improve or modernize Noel Wein Library. It's been a while. 1997 was the last time that anything was done in this building. I can't tell you how much the delivery of information has changed since then. I'm not going to bother boring you with a list of how it's changed and how things have altered and how much librarians' jobs have changed over those years. This building is fantastic. It has been retrofitted multiple times. Digital services can testify to that probably. We make do. It's the Alaskan way, we make do. But I believe that now is the time that we need to seriously consider the future of our children here. I think that's what it's all about. I think it's about leaving something behind, something that we work hard for, something that we have dreamed of. But it takes a very special group of people to make that happen. It takes a lot of people. So that's another reason why I really appreciate all your voices. We are creating opportunities for new types of programming by rethinking and reshuffling spaces and materials presently found on the Noel Wein Library floor. This is the comprehensive statement that we all came up with together to try to describe what we're doing here. Essentially today what we're trying to do is find out what you want from your library. This is your library. This is not our library. We are but public servants for you. We serve you. It's your library. So we would like to know what you want to see in the future of this library. I did just want to say one thing about the next slide. It needs to be explained that this has been a dream for so long because we have this money that was earmarked for libraries left over from the Bentley Trust years and years and years ago. I'm not sure exactly of the date. Part of that money was used to construct the North Pole branch, but this is money that has been available to us for some time, and this is the project that we would like to use it on. I think it's the best use of our time and money in regards to having to modernize services. This space study came about by a beautiful partnership between the commission and foundation. It was just a beautiful night there at the assembly that they all agreed to hire this wonderful crew. Martha Kyrillidou and Carson Block are here, experts in our field. Unbelievably comprehensive study they've been doing of our community and our facility and our, I don't know, there was measuring stuff and thinking about things. But I would like to introduce Martha. Thank you so much for coming. You guys are in for a treat today. We're going to have a good time.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. So Carson and me, Martha, are here. We also have Bill Wilson with us.
Hi, Bill.
Some of you met Bill so he's can watch the room in this position. Some of you met Bill during the first site visit I had here 2 weeks ago. And my second site visit is with Carson here. We are learning a lot about this community. My first trip to Alaska, I have traveled a lot. I'm originally from Greece. And actually, I'll say this personal story. My father is from the same village where Bobby's downtown, Bobby Nikolaidis is from. It's an incredible story. I know. What are the chances, right? But we are totally thrilled to learn more about this community. And we have been studying it, very intensely. By working with Carson here today, we want to start thinking about the opportunities the future has for us, and Carson is someone who's done library technology and innovation in libraries for a number of years, so the floor is his.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So is everybody ready to work this morning? You didn't come here just to eat little mini
Cinnamon rolls?
cinnamon rolls. I was going to say mini marshmallows, but I was thinking of something else. So good, because we're going to do some work together, because that's the whole idea. And I'll introduce myself. I'm Carson Block. I'm a library technology consultant. I've been doing library technology since the web was just a little baby in libraries. And that was a long time ago. And so we've kind of grown up together and learned a lot about each other. And the web is doing much better than I am at this point. But in my library experience, I've worked in a variety of spaces, mostly in Colorado before I started consulting. And so one of the jobs that I had in Colorado was working in rural Colorado, northeast Colorado, and working on connectivity issues. And rural issues are still very close to my heart. So while I get a chance to work for, I mean, this is an urban center in Alaska. And I work for ones that are of all sizes, like bigger urban centers. Like another client I have is Miami-Dade, which is humongous and mind-blowing and culturally like really different to try to understand. I also work with one room, one person, Carnegie Libraries on the Plains, right? Because all libraries have something in common, and that is harnessing technology to serve people. This is all about serving patrons and the people in that community. And everyone mixes that up a little bit different. I feel really like psyched to be here because I've been wanting to see Fairbanks since the first time I lived in Alaska. I lived in Alaska for 1 year working at Alaska Public Radio, before it became Alaska Public Media. And before I got hired, they said, well, we would like to hire you as a young guy. So we'd like to hire you to come up, and we want you to go to the different locations, including Fairbanks, and help work with reporters and kind of coach them because they all contribute stories, right, to APRN every night. And when I got here, APRN said, we don't have any travel money, so you're going to be doing all the work from Anchorage. So I got to learn about the state, but from the perspective of the telephone, because that was before any video conferencing, a telephone talking to people in communities. And so it's nice to finally see Fairbanks. It's so beautiful and chill here. But it's just really nice, and it's just such a pleasure to be here. So thank you for having us. I'm going to switch presentations, and there's Bill. See, I feel like Bill is looking at me, judging me. I'm so glad that Bill is retired and with us right now, because I missed you, man. We've worked a lot, and Bill, early in my consulting, was extremely warm and such a great mentor, and continues to be. So I'm really glad. I'm glad retirement's working out. Good for you, Bill. So I want to talk about the future that we make. I'm going to start my timer because we have so much to do today. I don't want to go over time. So I'm going to have a little thing to prompt me to hurry along if I haven't yet. One of the main things to think about is it's really tempting when we get an opportunity to change stuff is to try to change everything. Right? That's a bad idea. Focus is much better than trying to change everything. The problem with this is there's a lot of pent-up desire to do different things, right? When the opportunity comes up, everybody wants to pile on. So the good news is when you invite somebody from outside to come help with this, we're used to that, okay? And we want to hear all these things that are pent up, and then we try to find out a way, how do we harness these in a way that works together? And that's what's so important about this meeting here is my engagement here is 2 days. So yesterday was assessment activities. So what happens during assessment activities is I ask, so how's it going? What's working well? What's not working so well? And ask that from a bunch of different perspectives. Today, this is really more about vision. On your table, you have a worksheet that says, library teachers, my friends. Let me pass you out here at this table. I'm shared service. And so it looks like this. And what I want you to do is to trust your gut, because we're going to be going over a lot of different things that I hope are relevant to Noel Wein, looking at what we're trying to do here or what's possible here. trust your gut and write stuff down as it comes up. If there's something that's interesting to you, I want you to write it down, and I want you to write down why you think it's interesting, because after I'm done talking at you, I want you to share things that have come up or rise to the top for you, so that we have a sense of that. If you would like, we're going to collect those after today's presentation and compile all the notes into one. If you would like, and all the notes will be anonymous, but if you would like your sheet sent back to you, just put your email address on there, and when my assistant does the transcription, she'll just shoot you a PDF of your contribution. So please feel free to do that. So first I'd like to set context, just to make sure we're kind of all on the same page with where libraries are today. And so we might say, well, what's changing in libraries? It might be a better question to say, what's not changing? And some of this change has been disconcerting for all of us, for people who work in libraries, library staff, for people who go to libraries. The one thing that is missing for libraries is a lot of times when the rest of the world changes, a lot of us go, okay, so I'm sad about the things that we don't have anymore, but now I've got an opportunity to do something I couldn't do before, right? And so that's how I want us to be thinking about change in terms of some of the changes that I'm going to give you. This is not a new idea, and it's not an idea that I came up with. Back in the 60s, there was this book called Future Shock. Does anyone remember the book Future Shock? Okay, so this is an amazing quote from a book that came out in the 1960s. The 1960s. That's when the big movie was Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? The 1960s. This concept of looking at the future, the illiterate will not be someone who can't read and write, which is not exactly correct, but it'll be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn, right? And would you agree that that's the best strategy that we all have in our ever-changing society, to be able to learn, unlearn, and relearn, not be too, okay, good. If that's too complex, Yoda also said the same thing in just a couple of words, and I can't do a Yoda impression. Is anybody here? Nobody? Nobody? Come on, nobody wants to do it. Okay, all right. Well, I'm not going to do it, because I've tried it 12 times and it doesn't work. So let's talk about what's changing the most, though, in libraries, because not a lot of people are, unless you work in a library, I don't expect you to track this stuff. You might notice it when you visit the library. For library staff, the biggest change has been an abrupt change from static resources that were physical to active technology-based resources. So if we don't take that into account with longtime library staff, then we're not really giving longtime library staff their due. And I'll give an example. This is for the reference desk. There's this thing called Ready Reference. It's a collection of physical materials that's at the reference desk. So when you came up to ask a question of a reference librarian, they would have the answer. Now, these things didn't change very much, to the point that a good reference librarian, without breaking eye contact with you, if you came up with a question, they could find the volume back here, they could open it up for you without breaking eye contact and say, your answer is this. Okay? Librarians, can you give me a witness on that? Is that true? Okay, all right. So, guess what? Nothing is the same the last time that we left it when it's digital. Right? Nothing is the same. And so that's something that all libraries have been coping with, and whenever I'm working with libraries with technology and change, this is the first thing I want to recognize, because some people, they haven't thought of it this way before. They're like, yeah, you're right. And it's an important thing to recognize. The other thing is we've got lots and lots of digital content that can be kind of confusing. So what we're going to do with the rest of our 20 minutes is we're going to study this political cartoon. You don't want to do that? Okay. I don't either. This is like a lot of stuff that we see online, right? We see a historic image that had been lovingly scanned, and it's put out there. It's some kind of political cartoon. I won't go into it. And then this happens. And then this happens. What just happened? Well, this is the winning entry for DPLA's, Digital Public Library of America's, Check It Out contest, where public domain information is given to artists, and they say, make something awesome with it. So this was the grand prize winner in the first one. And I'd like to point out two things as you're watching this. The first is that the more you watch it, I promise, the more disturbing it will become. So if you're having that feeling, if you're starting to get that feeling, trust it. It should be a little bit, okay? And I've seen it a billion times by now. It never gets undisturbing after several loops. The other thing is, would you not say that the context of that is a lot different than the context of this? Because when it was in a digital form and given to someone else's hands, they changed it and they created a brand new context for the things. This is neither good nor bad, but it's something for us to recognize when we're looking at library services and the changeability of stuff, right? Especially stuff in the digital realm. Sometimes this is good, sometimes this is bad. This can be really, really bad when we know that, especially some of our young people are being raised in an environment where they don't have objective ways to judge things that they're reading, right? That they're learning and they're hearing about. This is a role that the library has that endures all these technological changes. There's stuff that doesn't change, and this is one of the things that does not change in a library, and that is, this is the place where people come for objective, no barriers information. These are old articles, but they're a couple years old at this point. But they're ripped from recent developments. This has not changed in a couple of years. So why do we bother with this? Because this is, in some places, this is the only safe place, welcoming place where everyone in the community is welcome. There's no one taking a head count at the door. There's no one checking cred. There's nobody getting tips or accepting bribes to get in or dressing really sharp. Not that I'm dressed really sharp. I just put on a jacket over my jeans. I fooled you, didn't I? I know I didn't. But this is very important because in the age of information, the library is the only place that offers these things at no direct cost to the patron. These things cost money, and we have chosen to tax ourselves. We think this is so important that we have pumped up in our taxes to say, having this access is important. We're going to pay for it, okay? But we don't charge the user directly. That doesn't happen anywhere else in the age of information. We're paying cash, we're trading information about ourselves to get access. This is what makes the library important and special and worth sweating about. So let's consider what the library is today. As we're looking at a couple of the specific things, and I will show you some specific things, not just be all up here in the ether talking about those sorts of things. When I'm looking at a project, I think of 3 different service channels that we help people in. And these are just 3 different ways so that we get the best out of our technology investment. The first is all the stuff that happens inside the library. So that's our collections, that's our programs, that's our technology, it's our people spaces and gathering spaces and stuff like that. There's also the stuff that happens outside the library, and in your case, you've got this awesome bookmobile in the cleanest garage I've ever imagined I've ever seen. I was amazed. It's like, you kept this. This is awesome, because I know what it's like when other times of year. And so that's an example. But this is also anytime there's something library happening outside the walls of the library. So library staff, you know that when people recognize you as a library staff member, guess what? They ask you a library question, don't they? So I consider that to be part of the outside services. Technology is next. And some people expect technology to be a nice little circle there or there for a nice neat Venn diagram. But actually, this is the role of technology. It is not more important than those other 2 things at all. But they do encompass the things that are happening inside and outside the library, and sometimes it's its own thing as well. If we can think about all 3 of these things at the same time, that's when we get the most out of our technology investment. Because the other thing that made technology weird in libraries is that it's expensive. It's much more expensive than anything else that we encountered as a resource. For most library staff, that's what we pay the most for. That's what we need to run libraries. The cost of technologies kind of came in at like a thief in the night, so most libraries are still struggling with how to incorporate that. The other thing too is that great libraries are hyper-local. I'm going to show you stuff. The stuff only is good as it fits you. So it's good for inspiration, but not good for copying. A lot of folks in libraries will look at a successful program that someone else has done, and they want that bad. So they do it, but it's not really connected to a real need in their community. I know that I'm not the first person to have this notion. Most Alaskans already know this because everything is completely different here than the lower 48, and there's different conditions. So for a lot of audiences, this is not news to you. This is how you live your daily life. But it's something that I want you to remember because a technology program is only as good as the good it does in your community. That's only as good as it is. As much as I like technology, I know it's not better than that. The other thing, too, just to make sure we're all on the same page, is that rarely in my lifetime have I seen an old technology completely supplant a new technology. A lot of times we think it is. Like when e-books came on, there was a big strum and cry. It's like, oh my God, physical books are going to go away. Have physical books gone away? What are millennials like? physical books. No, they didn't go away. So this happens more often than not. But when we're looking at technology, people get confused about this. I'm a musician. I love music. This is my favorite example. This remains the hottest selling format, physical format for music. Now, it's not the predominant consumer format. Streaming is. Doesn't do you much good for your patrons, right? Because connectivity is not robust outside of the city centers. But I love this because these never went away. And I love the conversations I hear. Like I used to hear, like it was usually I can remember in '82, like when the CD started coming up, I'd hear these old crusty jazz guys. They'd say, "Oh, those things are terrible. They're sterile. They don't sound good. They're not warm." And now I hear the exact same words, but it's like coming out of the mouth of a 17-year-old young lady. It's great. I just love this. It's great to get old and make it through some of those changes. But this is an example of things living in parallel, and they're living just fine. They're just in different proportions. And that means we want to pick things that are the right proportion for us in our library services. Here's a couple of broad library trends that are happening. These are things that happen in pockets. They're not universal. Nothing in libraries are universal because of the hyper-local sort of thing. So these are sorts of shifts that are really interesting to me. One is that we're shifting from a place that's a static place to an active place. Most libraries are active community centers, and one of our biggest challenges is to make sure that we have both noisy spaces and quiet spaces, right? It can't be one or the other. We have to have both noisy spaces and quiet spaces because there's functions and reasons for both of those. And in fact, in a lot of libraries, there's a lot of grand hall designs where there's no way to keep them quiet. And so the challenge in those places is to make sure there's study spaces, contemplative spaces that are quiet. And so I know you've got 2 phone booths that we can start with. I love that. It was so great to see the phone booths. I thought that's great. And you could put something around them and shield them from Wi-Fi, and they could just be like complete isolation, sensory deprivation chambers, which could work, right? It could work. The other thing is that libraries are going from measuring their value from measuring just transactional sorts of things, like people coming into doors, the circulation of the collection, people coming to programs, into thinking about how are we helping transform our community and the community that it wants to be in a library way, in a way that's appropriate for the library to support things that are happening. We'll talk about some of those. This is my most exciting thing because this really gives us a new dimension as library workers to say, how do we dig in and really help our community do something that it needs to do because we've got the right resources for that. Moving from a place of consumption to creation. Libraries used to be the big warehouse of information that people came to grab stuff. Now it's a place where people come to also make things together. Right? Also, we're going from just a few formats to a lot of formats. This is actually on the technical side, but it's really hard for us to grapple because it used to be easy when everything that we lent was something that we bought. Now we are connecting people to things that can't be bought. Right? They're available free on the internet, but they're still good information, and so that's kind of a new thing. Shifting from formal education to self-directed education. I think this is the greatest opportunity for a public library in the history of libraries, is the fact that all sorts and levels of education are now available. People still need connectivity. They need equipment to be able to view that education. They need other people to be with, if that's their learning style, right? Learning groups. Sometimes they need proctored tests, things like that. This is really exciting to me. Also moving from one size fits all to personalization, which is a struggle for libraries because of the idea of privacy and confidentiality, which we can never break. Because once we've broken the trust that people have in us to handle them in a private and confidential way, then it's game over for libraries. And so that one's a little bit tricky. The last is moving from reactive to strategic. And before, we just waited for people to come in and it's like, yeah, whatever you need, yeah, just ask. Now we have to really do a better job of anticipating what needs might be there and planning for them. And that is why you are all here. So now it's time to look at specific technologies. I'm not doing too bad, but I've got to go a little faster, about 15 more minutes. As I go, I'm going to go kind of quick, but I want you to, again, as something strikes you, grab your gut, write it down. If you think it's interesting and relevant here. And then after the presentation, I would like to hear from you the things that rose to the top for you. But we're going to collect all your feedback. If you don't feel like vocalizing it, that's totally fine, because it will go into the report from here if you write it down and allow us to connect it. We're going to start with what I think is the sexiest room in the library. That's the data closet. Now, not this data closet, not particularly this data closet, but having scalable infrastructure is essential, because every digital service that we offer relies on a backbone that is working well and has the ability to grow, right? The ability to grow, because what I do know, I can't predict a lot of things. I can predict that we're going to want more bandwidth. Whatever we have today, we're going to want more tomorrow. Whatever we have tomorrow, we're going to want more from there, because that is the way of digital services, right? So this is the first thing that is of concern to me is the how is the internet connection, how's the data cabling, power and Wi-Fi. I was like psyched. I got a call from the Wall Street Journal yesterday to talk to a reporter working on broadband in the U.S. and he was shocked when I said, well, in some places. I told him a couple of Fairbanks stories that came up yesterday. He thought it was amazing that people brought in their Xboxes and their PlayStations to update them at the library because they don't have connectivity at home. He's like, whoa, really? And it's like, yes, really. And then even further, he's used to looking at these things in different sorts of measures. When I told him that some places in rural, like Texas, for less than 10 megabits a second, which is not very fast, people are paying hundreds of dollars for that connection. He said, are you kidding? And I said, no, I'm not kidding. So I was psyched by that, because having that sort of awareness and an influential paper like that is amazing, right? So I'm hoping that they actually write about that. But that's why this is important to us. We need this, and we need to stay ahead of our bandwidth demands, no matter what size of library we have. We also need to make sure that there's ergonomic access to power. How many times have you seen this in your life? How many times have you been this person in your life?
Today?
Yeah, today, yes. It was so fresh, it just came right back to me. So these are the sorts of things that we want to avoid. This is horrible customer service, even though she looks very content. It's probably hiding out in the airport or something. That's horrible customer service, right? And I'm not saying that, and I'm saying this out of love, because this is the challenge I've seen in every building that was not built 5 years ago. Every building not built 5 years ago has the same problem. So it's like, well, let's look at ways that we can improve this. And this has been part of our discussions as a design team. People are delighted. They're delighted so much when this happens. They'll post selfies of themselves when they plug something in, right? This is from a Twitter account called Outlets in Libraries. And I recommend you pick that up, because people are like, I thought that was hilarious first time I saw it. But I love this one because he's psyched. He's obviously plugged in down there or something. The other thing is looking at the flexibility of meeting spaces in AV. And I would say that this room itself was really easy to get set up in this morning. And this is an example of some of the foresight that goes into thinking. And there's been different retrofits of this room, right? This has emerged over time. These are some examples of those spaces. I like this one. This was in Miami. This was during the summer. There's one kid at the movie. The one kid is the best seat in the house there. And isn't that great? But the idea is but you can see there's multiple screens there in that case. So thinking about what are all of the uses of the room that we might have, and how do we make it flexible. One thing that's I think very important, especially as boomers, a big part of our population get older, is to have hearing loops in meeting rooms. And so if you haven't heard of a hearing loop, what it is, it's an inductive coil. So it's really old school technology that energizes the elements that are in hearing aids. And it does it just through electromagnetics. So they don't need a fancy receiver to do this, even though this library has some devices that they can check out for people without hearing aids. And what the hearing loop does, it's not that expensive, but it adds that extra a bit of help for folks. There's a couple of libraries where I've worked in where we've put the hearing loop in at the drive-up window, right, for people coming up, or at the public service desk. To allow a better interaction. So it doesn't have to just be in a broadcast or a big sort of thing like this. It can really be thinking about one-to-one. So I love stuff like that, just little things that can make a difference for people. Meeting rooms that are ready to rock and roll. I'm a person who travels a lot. I've got to do a lot of meetings when I'm traveling. They come up out of nowhere. I'm expecting to be able to walk into a place, into a library, go into a meeting room, open my laptop, and get to work like that, right? No barriers to that at all. And it's not that hard to do that. It's having certain things here, like a big screen to collaborate with if I was with other folks, or to be able to view their screen if we were doing a video conferencing. Again, the strong Wi-Fi, having stuff to plug into. Very, very close. It's really important, as we've mentioned before. And also little things like whiteboards and corkboards that are just part of the thing. The thing I don't see enough of, I have seen more whiteboard sort of things, but just having a corkboard to be able to pin stuff up on, that's really an awesome thing. It doesn't cost very much, and it's extremely functional. We're going to talk really briefly about the library as a place of creation and not just consumption. We think about maker spaces when we say that, and we've got a good make activity happening here. I would like to define this, though, because this is a very confusing term for a lot of folks. A maker space usually includes, number one, a strong program around the idea of making things. And so that has intent, it has scope and scale in that. And resource and staffing needs are considered, because these don't run themselves, they need to be tended to. Most of the places have flexible, sturdy, and easy to move furnishings, so that's part of it. Storage, like lots of places to store stuff, because make is like a shop, so we've got to have places to put things. Fixed work areas like countertops. Infrastructure that's appropriate to the space, which includes power, data. Sometimes that means venting and HVAC sorts of things. Some things make fumes, or they create dust that they don't work well with our lungs, so we need to get them out of there. And also cleanable, easy surfaces. So what I think, as I'm describing this, you're probably thinking, yeah, you're describing those industrial sort of machine shop environments. But I would say that this is also an awesome makerspace, which is nothing more than one of those tables without the paper on it, and wonderful people coming together to make things with their hands. That's what a makerspace is. It's people gathering together in a space to make things with their hands in community. That's where it starts. So it doesn't have to be any fancier than this. And I love that photo, because that's beautiful work, right? They're doing very beautiful work together.
I'm so sorry.
Please. Please.
I am I love makerspace. In my life, and I will say, as a school librarian,
Yes.
maker spaces, I work in middle school where they don't want you in their face, they don't want to talk
Yes.
to you, it is passive programming.
Right on.
Put it out, they do it, and it doesn't require you always. You kind of keep up with a little bit, but you don't. To me, this is a secret of passive programming, where you don't always have to have an event and activity. You can just sit there, and nobody has to man the booth. That's all I'm going to say.
I love that. Thank you.
I love it.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you. That is wonderful. And again, I hate talking at people so much. I usually am much more interactive, but this time I'm talking at you, and then I'll shut up and just listen. So thank you. And interrupt at any moment. This is examples of more higher tech maker spaces. I used 21C from Pikes Peak, Colorado Springs, because they had done this with a shoestring. They had hardly any budget, and the reason their program is successful is not the flashy gee whiz stuff that I'm showing you behind me. It's because they're connected to the needs in Colorado Springs, and people doing things like prototyping, physical things, creating patents, and using it as a machine shop. And so the gear comes in and out there because they're being reactive to what the community needs. And that's why it's successful. It's not just the nice shiny photos that I'm showing you. It is really the program that makes it successful. They decided to connect to the community and do a great job with that. There's also a media creation, which is, you can, like this is an example of a teen space. That they have at Miami-Dade, and it's awesome. It's a really nice teen space where audio and video content of all sorts of things can be made. So there's music that's created there. There's video content. There's different audio. Tacoma Public Library has a story lab. If you ever make it down, because I know a lot of folks go back and forth between here and SeaTac. Tacoma Public has done a really great job with this. They're super challenged, right? Their budget in Tacoma proper is not the same as Pierce County. They've done an outstanding job with things. Yes, I'm so sorry.
This library was originally built with a dark room, a
Yes, I saw it, yes.
It
Yes.
had the sound room, and the piano practice room, and then there was an AV room that I can't quite remember what you could do in there, but they never probably fully utilized it. The idea when this library was created was definitely to be a community makerspace, but
Exactly,
I
yes.
assume I wasn't there then, I assume the staff couldn't handle it, so.
That's a great point, because some things also come in and out of style, right? So they're not as strong. And I, you know, when I toured, and I love this, when I toured and they showed me where the dark room was, I wanted to see if I could smell the chemicals from the
It's
floor.
been a long time.
It's been a long time. I'm just geeky that way. It's like, oh, let's look at the heritage. Thank you for bringing that up. That's reflecting on the heritage that you have here. You also have an opportunity to do different things with children's spaces. And so this is an example of like one of the ways to handle tablet computers and kids, if you want kids to have tablet computers, is to make this is called a crayon kiosk, so a vendor makes that. But the idea is it's kind of a focal point, and kids know that's where they go to be able to work on things, and it has that sort of appeal. Teen spaces, it looks like you have a tremendous opportunity here to modernize the teen space and the way that you're serving teens. So teen spaces have a lot of stuff. The main thing is to have a feeling of privacy for the teens without too much privacy. It's not enough, because you don't want that kind of space at your library. You want just good teen spaces. And that happens in libraries. What's cool here, this is from Austin Public Library. And this right here is a collaborative bars that are right next to each other. You see they've got the low seating, but they've got display screens that can be shared there. And I think that's an interesting approach. And just as long as there's some sort of display device, because all kids have their own devices. They have their own computer banks at Austin. This is from Cincinnati, and I thought it was a very nice way of doing a low-tech teen space, because look at all the space there, and you can see that teens can come in and move stuff around like they want to move it, and that's an important part of the teen spaces. Also, gaming for teens is really important, just having gaming opportunities and being able to provide that. And this is just some of the eye candy from Cincinnati. Yeah, this is from Cincinnati. They have this enormous downtown library. It covers like 2 city blocks. And most libraries would kill for that space. Also, there's the idea of just computers. I don't recommend this, because we're multimodal. We all live in multiple modes in society. But I want to show you what 2 places I've done with putting technology up front. This is the Bexar, Texas Library near San Antonio. They did this on purpose. It's not a public library. It's part of the county, Bexar County, spelled B-E-X-A-R, but it's pronounced Bexar. And they wanted to, it's an underprivileged area of San Antonio. They wanted to have a tech forward thing. My criticism is those workstations are way too close to each other, right? But they wanted to have that impact in the community. I went and met with them. It was a very busy, vibrant place. The busiest thing that they had were the community meeting rooms, because it was a safe, neutral place in the community to have meetings and gatherings. Sometimes you show something, and then the function invites other things that are valuable as well. The Do Space is sort of a similar thing in Omaha, Nebraska. This is privately funded, but they operate much like a library. I've got a Do Space card, and they're kind of a full-featured maker space, but they've got tons and tons and tons of computers, and you can see the smattering back there of the computers that they have, and they're very busy. There's another view of the computers there as well, but they're very busy. A lot of people say, well, we're at the end of the PC era. Not in libraries, because there's so many things that are so difficult to do in a mobile format that we need to support full workstations. Also thinking in terms of collaborative spaces for people to bring. I'm assuming that between these 2 people here, they have another device, a laptop of some sort. They're also very comfortable. There's a nice cup of coffee or something there so that they can work. And having just room for individual spaces. One thing that was totally old school is to have these cubicles for computer work. I don't know anybody who functions really well that way. Everybody has stuff. Noel Wein is experimenting with vending, and so this is one type of vending unit, but this is a way to relieve staff need to check in-house computers in and out, and so I'm really psyched about that project here. Also looking at self-service, you've got significant focus on self-service at the front, and I love it very much. And I was able to poke around on that a little bit, and I think that would be a really cool thing to study and say, how can it be even better than it is now? Because I think it looks really great. It's very convenient, and it's very much in the path. And I mean little things like, I always think of moms when I think of self-check, and I think of what moms have. Moms have kids. They're carrying lots of stuff and also carrying lots of things. So I always like having lots of like space for them to put their stuff on because of that. Those are just some different self-checks. Another thing that I think would be extremely interesting, especially in Alaska, is thinking about what is the role of the library in fostering economic development. There are spaces here for people to use to conduct business, right? And I know that that's also a policy decision, but many libraries have opened up their doors to create co-working spaces or spaces for people to come in, and this is basically, the library is their office, right? And they're welcome there, and there's space that's devoted for that functional work. Now, there's not selling going on to patrons in these spaces. These are basically for solo workers or somebody who might work in a co-working space in a different community. This one's really exciting to me too, the education continuum, because this is where kids come when school is not open. And so thinking about our partnership with schools is really important. How can curriculum be supported here for students, and so that there's no weird drop-off? They just are being attended for, we're tending for our young people in our public institutions, and that's something to think about. New and self-directed education, it's never been a better time to learn things. In fact, it's overwhelming, the number of things that and resources that we have. And so since that's true, thinking about how we can make our spaces and technology accessible, the most accessible for people who are on a learning journey is really important. I mean, I'm at a point where I'm not convinced that that degree programs are the only way to go forward in the future. There's myriad ways now for people to develop themselves and to not just study things for their career, but also just for their enrichment. It's an amazing time, and we're perfectly poised to help. We also have special populations, and every community has different special populations that they need to serve. They have different needs, and sometimes we see them, sometimes we don't, but always incredibly important to consider. When it comes to technology, it's also okay to just try some stuff and not make it an official library program, right? And so I love this picture because that poor slack-jawed young lady is lost in her virtual reality, and that's kind of what it looks like from the outside, right? Viewing this. From the inside, it's a completely different thing. And how many people have tried virtual reality goggles? Okay, we have a couple. Okay. And so the experience is interesting. It's also where we're going to be heading, virtual reality and augmented reality for different applications. It certainly is going to be there for entertainment, and all the Disneylands and places like that are concerned about the competition that they're going to get in the home versus what people would come to a park for. It's also an incredible learning opportunity and a way to do different things, especially I think in Alaska, where you might need an expert to be able to look over your shoulder while you're doing something, right? To repair something or to do something, an expert from far away. That's a need all over the world because experts are not where you need them to be. So there's interesting opportunities there, and this poor kid. But the picture's great, right? This one is dodgy because of your connectivity, but I wanted to make you aware that a lot of libraries in the lower 48 are actually lending out the internet. They're lending out mobile hotspots. Sonoma County just completing their strategic plan for technology, and they bought 500. 500. They got money. They passed a measure. They're in California, they figured it out, and they're spending it. But they have 500 mobile hotspots, and they're being used, and they're actually making transformational change for people because they've had fires in that area lately, as you know, the Camp Fire, leaving a lot of people without places to live or rebuilding. And so in some cases, library connectivity via these hotspots is what they have. I know that's a tough thing here, but I wanted to, because the connectivity is just not there outside of the urban centers. But it's something to think about. What are the niches that we have that we can serve in some way in a low impact way? There's also new service models in the library, and that's where library staff work more side by side with people. And I didn't get to observe what was going on here, so I didn't even ask, so I apologize. But the idea is that we have technology support for that, and also I'm extremely excited about the possibilities that we talked about for the bookmobile, because that gets out there, and I think that's one of those niches. And so the last thing I want to mention, because we're kind of almost going over, is the idea of 24/7 or extended library services. And every library that I'm working with on a construction type project or a design project, everyone's talking about this in some way, shape, or form. 24/7 is way too big. I don't know of any library in the U.S. that's doing 24/7, but extended hours, especially like in a lobby, where people can do library things, are being discussed. There's products that are available from different vendors to do this. I would caution against the product. Don't think about the product first, think about the service that's needed. A lot of libraries that I work with, for instance, if there's not behavioral issues or safety issues, they will leave their Wi-Fi on 24/7 so that people who live in the surrounding areas can drive in and access that at their schedule. So that, to me, that's an example. But there's other things that can happen as well that happen in different places. So I'm going to, we're going to skip these slides here, even though it had a great joke about Soylent Green. Of those things, we went through that really quick, but we do have time. I would like to hear I know I was talking at you a lot, other than, or even including makerspaces, what things captured your imagination, or what do you think might be interesting here? Things that you grabbed to write down. Anything come to mind? Yes?
So for, I know for younger generations, edit bays are huge.
Okay.
For video editing, YouTubers, Instagrammers, anything like that. Just having, I know the Adobe collection is expensive, but if you have one or two designated computers that have that, it's a huge thing. And just having that edit bay that is, got the recording spots, like, it's a very, very big trend that I don't really see going away anytime soon.
I agree.
So,
yeah, I think it'll just get stronger, even go into like the AR and VR stuff as well. Great. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think maybe a great opportunity here. Thank you. Very good. Yes.
I think one of the things is answering the question for the business community is why should we fund the library in this grand scheme or this grand way? And so how does the library connect to the larger community, especially the businesses? And how can the library be connected to businesses within the community to increase tourism,
Absolutely,
to
yes.
increase connection to the different shops that are around town that can do certain things, like my mower has gone down. What is a good place that I can send it to get it fixed?
Right, exactly.
How do I get it fixed? How do I do basic maintenance?
Yes.
And I also think some of the things such as library is great, but I look around the room and I see 1, 2, 3, 4 men here, and then the rest are women. Not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but just saying that how do you get more men into the library?
Sure. To be more reflective of the overall community. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I think that's really good.
And shakers.
That's right.
Who own them.
But when I was a young man, the Chilton's manuals brought me in.
The way they
The
did.
Chilton's, that's what brought me in as a young guy, was Chilton's auto repair manuals. I was like, I can't afford that. I'm going to go to the library. And so I added my grease prints to that. Excellent. Excellent point. Thank you. Other thoughts that grabbed you that you thought would be awesome? Yes.
Well, kind of bouncing off that.
Yes.
This really doesn't really reflect, some people here are super users, some of us are users, and I occasionally work in the library. Some people work here full time, but there aren't so many users here, and especially the class of users I'm thinking of is the people who now have to come to the library for the technology.
Yes.
I think in the past, people had to come use books, that's true. But now people, for job applications, to find out medical things, to get relicensed, to take their skill tests, all kinds of things, they have to come into the library. A lot of them are not prepared to use the technology, especially if they're over a certain age, but not exclusively.
Yes.
Older people.
Yes.
And the kind of instruction that's needed isn't totally solved by having classes, because you
Absolutely.
don't go to a class in anticipation of someday I may have to apply for a job, and the only place I'll be able to get
That's right.
online is at the library. So I think the kind of one-on-one instruction that people need is a huge challenge that is very hard to meet and requires more staff than we have access to right now.
And your points are excellent. Martha, later in the presentation, will talk about more the broad-based input from the community. But that very issue is something that we workshopped in staff meeting yesterday, because of the need that people have for more in-depth help, and if they come in at the wrong time, they might be out of luck. So it's something to think about ahead of, to say, how can we design that assistance? You're also absolutely right. Goggles they're just a way. They're just a medium among many to accomplish what we want to do in terms of learning, job readiness and stuff like that. Very good points. Thank you. Yes?
A real quick question, on both of these, and this is, I don't know the answer to this. Is there a certified proctor here for types of
There's not.
exams? Okay.
Yeah.
There's not, only
Yeah.
you.
Okay, and then
So that'd be
the,
great, wouldn't it?
But there are libraries that have testing rooms.
yeah, which would be huge, but also what you were saying specifically, because this is such a small business anchored town,
Yeah.
is to have a source of it, like a directory, because I have a Kirby, and I just found out a few weeks ago that there's a Kirby fixer in town, and
No
I'm not
kidding.
selling my thing, because I love the Kirby. But I'm not about to go on YouTube and try to figure it out myself, because I'm probably just gonna electrocute myself. So, but to have a directory, because I know
Yeah.
in our family business, we have snow machines, four-wheelers, boats, but a lot of people need those manuals, and like, we
Right.
get extra
Right.
manuals, so we could just give them to the library, and people would know that they're here, that type of thing.
Yeah,
Or
just
be able to-
better connections that way, and a grassroots way.
Yeah,
If
to be
somebody
able to-
needs- And you have resources to share that the library can use to share with others. That's awesome. Thank you. Yes?
I had kind of a thought, going back to what you talked about economic development,
Yes.
and people come in and have a space where they can come and work. And I was thinking there's a lot of research that comes through the community and just kind of just almost fly by night, you never sort of see them.
Yeah.
And in smaller communities like out in rural Alaska, the library functions as an ark, because it's kind of like the big space where people can stay overnight. So if there's research being done on the tundra, they're at the school. And
Yeah.
I think the unique opportunity there is you have kids that are interacting with like PhD level research on art
Yes.
terms or whatever it is. So there's this exchange. And I wonder if there's a chance here for almost having like a space that allows like a artist in residence or a science in residence or something like that, where they're here for a week and they're just doing their stuff, but they're in a fish tank and people can kind of pass by and see what they're doing. It doesn't like evaporate after they get back on the plane.
I was thinking about when I was watching public TV here, I was thinking of all the crews and all the people that come through and then they leave. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I think
Yeah,
it's a golden opportunity.
some way to like capture that and present it in a way that's approachable.
Yeah.
It's not like in a locked little meeting room where you have this barrier of cost to interact with them.
Awesome idea.
Especially with the huge, school age population that's just across the street.
Yes.
You know, super captive audience that.
Yeah. Totally. Yes.
I was just going to say, just marrying what I'm hearing from everyone is in each suggestion for services, it's all about collaboration,
Yep.
outreach, that 24/7 library. It doesn't stop. It's not just about technology. It's about staff and being in the community. And if you develop those partnerships within the community, then there's this reciprocation. It's always ongoing.
And it's awesome.
And, I came from a library in rural Alaska, and, we had lecture series just whenever there was a scientist in town. You knew the right people, and you get phone calls, and, hey,
Right.
so-and-so's in town,
Yeah.
got space on Tuesday morning? Yes, we do.
Yeah.
But it touches, I think that it was that outreach and 24/7 library concept that really, it marries
Oh, right
all
on.
of this together.
Very good, and to think about it in a very broad sense. Yes. Yes.
And how about pardon my language, how about a big-ass sign in front of the library that just has, it's electronic, that basically
Yeah.
says all the programs that are going on in the library
Yes.
for this day?
Yes.
Just things that bring you in with a big arrow that
Yeah, basically. Well, something that, and that was, I worked with LUSAC Library too, and that was important in Anchorage, because the buildings here are designed to be fortresses in the winter, right? People need a place to be, and so that means that it's not always clear what's the incredibly awesome things that are happening inside the buildings unless you're already in the know. So some way to bridge that, and I would say that the big ass sign is a good idea. I would also think multimodal. To think we also have little ass signs in our mobile phones, right? So we have, and so thinking of all the different ways of communicating that to different age groups and different users. That is a great concept. I love it. I know we've got to move on. Does anybody though have any last comments before we go into the next part of our program? Yes.
Yeah, you touched on it, and Melissa knows about it. You mentioned telecoil.
Yes.
This library's had it since the beginning, to my knowledge. It's been turned on once when I asked for it, and it didn't work.
Okay.
The North Pole Library, allegedly, everybody in Europe knows what this is. Few people in the room do, because it's one of the younger crowds I've seen in this room. I've probably been to 100 lectures in here. Telecoil. With two hearing aids in, I can't hear a lot of what's going on. I can't hear the questions.
I apologize.
The average age of audiences in this room is often about 60.
Okay.
And guys check out early for a lot of reasons, not as smart, but also because we lose our faculty sooner.
Yeah.
So we're at home turning up the TV or whatever most people are doing.
Right.
But this is something that needs to be, this is something that's very common in Europe, starting to become on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And I bet if you go to the North Pole Library, it's never been turned on there. I hope I'm wrong, but let's get up to date so that the people who actually come to these lectures can hear them.
Right. Exactly. That's right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Any other last thoughts before we move on? Yes.
You take a look at the population that's here right now, young adults, middle-aged, and seniors. Yet I have yet to go in the library
Okay.
and not be disturbed by teens
Okay.
talking and communicating. I feel like going over and telling them, well, why don't you text? You know? I'm going to do that one of these days, but because you guys can't be everywhere.
I think that'd be fun.
But we looked at all this here. Let them know what maybe they don't quite comprehend what the rules are. Shut up and let people talk, but that's
Sure. So the idea is just having spaces where you're able to do what you would like to
look at
do.
the population here. You don't see any teens here.
Right.
And yet they do occupy it.
Okay.
And I don't know, and everybody here kind of Caucasian. What about minority usage of the library?
Absolutely,
I've seen stuff that I walk in here, quite a few minorities, and
Right.
but there aren't here at the meeting.
Martha will talk about the overall engagement with all the community members a little bit later in the meeting, but you're right on to ask those questions because every voice needs to be represented. That's absolutely right. Very good. And I like what you're saying, though, about really making sure that we have spaces for all of the functions that people need when they come in. So some people need, maybe they need a texting room. Right? I love that idea. It's like, keep it down. Can't you guys just text each other?
Someone go to a restaurant and you see a young couple sitting there, and instead of talking to each other, they
Right, exactly.
how do they do that in the library?
Exactly, yeah. Well, thank you very much. I don't want to...
Put up a sign, text, keep your mouth shut.
I want to get a bumper sticker.
Yeah, that really works.
Don't text and drive, but text and keep your mouth shut. Folks, thank you. Oh, yes, please. No, of course.
As a parent of 3 teens and a preteen, I would love to see a space specifically for them.
Yes.
Like right now, in the Berry Room, they have the tables that would be a great place for teens to actually have discussions.
Absolutely.
But the teens don't want to be in the library.
Yeah.
So, I would really encourage to have a teen-specific focus group or something?
That's exactly, yeah. Yeah, and really thinking about what they need, because they have multiple needs. Sometimes teams need a quiet place to come in and just work, right? And everyone's like to work together. So it's definitely, that's an excellent suggestion, and thanks for voicing that here. That's good. Yes?
You look at what Costco's done at Sam's Club, they have some real good engineers, good ideas.
Yeah, I agree.
We could do that here, maybe, but you're going to have to probably, to accommodate everything we're talking here, we're going to have to make an extension library. Are the funds available?
Oh, yeah, now our goal is to not go outside of the existing footprint in the work that we're doing. That's the direction that we've been given, is these would all be changes. Now, that does not mean that your community doesn't need more footprint of library.
Yeah, and there is a master plan that actually was developed a few years ago that we have been studying that does talk about an expansion, but the funds for that were never on the table. We briefly met with the mayor over the Borough mayor, where he was here. And he did mention the call that he has out. Is the call out already for public works priorities?
For people nominating projects.
People are nominating projects, and he encouraged during our discussion the notion that the library project be nominated and look back at those plans and possibly look at that expansion. Our project is for the renovation of the current footprint.
Thank you for that energetic conversation. I told you I was going to put you to work and did admirably. Thank you very much. And we have an activity for you to do. We're going to have a break, but we want you to work during the break too. Isn't that nice? Everyone gets, how many dots total? 4. 8 dots total. And what we're going to ask you to do is use 2 dots voting for things that you like on each poster. So only 2 dots per poster.
Poster per picture on the poster.
Per poster.
Okay.
2 dots per poster.
Got it.
Yeah, spend them wisely. That's right. Thank you very much. Feel free to get up, stretch your legs, do that, and thank you. You all are awesome. That was fun.